With nearly 2,000 downloads and a proud spot on FeedSpot's Top 100 Architecture podcast, we're grateful to be building a platform that resonates with architects, designers, and design thinkers across the globe. Welcome back to Architects Beyond, a podcast where we explore tools, ideas, and all the shaping of the future that you need in architecture. I'm your host, Brandon Gibbs. Today marks our milestone of our 30th episode. With nearly 2,000 downloads and a proud spot on FeedSpot's Top 100 Architecture podcast, we're grateful to be building a platform that resonates with architects, designers, and design thinkers across the globe. So, in this special episode, we're taking a journey through the archives, highlighting some of the most insightful, inspiring moments from our top episodes. Of course, we couldn't put everything, so just put snippets from several episodes and leave the rest for you to explore. From decoding the building code to mastering SketchUp, Revit, to learning from the leaders at Big and lead fellows in sustainability, this recap is packed with lessons that matter. Whether you're just starting your career or leading your own firm, all these conversations offer valuable perspectives and practical wisdom. So let's dive in and celebrate how far we've come together. Before we jump in, though, our first highlight, a quick thank you from our sponsor for today's episode, Iamthestudio. So if you're looking to level up your skills in the top design school tools and methods from Revit to Rhino, Grasshopper, AI rendering, and more, Iamthestudio has the training you need to stay ahead. And to celebrate our 30th episode, you can use the code BEYOND30 for 30% off any course or a subscription. Just head to iamthestudio.com and start learning from expert-led content made for architects and designers like yourself. Let's dive into our first clip. Let's start at the beginning with the journey into the field itself. Here's Elif Bayram from our very first episode on the personal path to becoming an architect. What was the genesis that led sort of from where your thoughts about architecture to ARE questions?
ARE questions is not part of a big project or design process, which is very unlike me because everything I have done in my life up until to ARE questions has always been part of a big plan. So I'm a planner by heart, and I guess that's why I picked architecture as a profession, because I really like to organize and plan and strategize. So I really liked it, and it really spoke to me. But ARE questions is like kind of a happy accident, because what I did was I was in my own zone trying to pass the architecture registrations exams. That was my first time taking a standardized test in this country. So I was trying to learn the system in American education, like trying to understand the American education system and how they verbalize the questions. I passed first 4 exams myself, but the last 2 exams I got stuck. So I joined to a community of architects, and that community actually gave me a new look, a new perspective. And up until that point, I was preparing my own practice material for my own study purposes. Once I opened up that materials that I prepared for myself to the community of people, they were amazed by just the sheer effort.
Is there anything that I guess you'd like to sort of share with some of the audience for maybe people on the edge or people in the process?
It is a very personal journey, and it totally depends on your background, your experience level, how much time you can put in a day to your studies. But it requires a dedication. But if you started this, or if you're considering to start this process, it definitely worth the effort. I think that's the future of architecture in this country. I always suggest people to get their license because it's empowering. I think architecture in this country, and probably many places in the world too, is a little like working in an office is very demanding, and usually we are underpaid and overworked. So I really want architectural workers to have more power in hand to when they are negotiating their fees, when they are negotiating their hours. If you have a license that gives you the freedom to start your own office or your and other projects or other businesses that you have in mind, you can start those, and you can be you can make more money and have a better work-life balance.
Designing with intention means thinking beyond aesthetics. Lead fellow Blake Jackson shared how sustainability can become a core vision and design driver, not just an afterthought. Question is, with a wealth of experience and knowledge, can you talk about some of the key projects and initiatives that have been particularly impactful in your career and how they've contributed to your success as a leader with sustainability?
Sure. I've got to give credit to the USGBC for creating the lead rating system, because for better or for worse, it's been one of the more useful things I learned along the way. It's something I use constantly, and it's sort of has become the lingua franca, so to speak, of sustainability and the way that we think about it. And again, for better or for worse, because sometimes that can be a bit limiting, but also it's nice to have a common language, because that didn't exist before the 90s when we were talking about building performance and holistic sustainability approaches. So I do have to say that is one of the strings that pulls together 2006, when I had my conversion moment, to now and today and tomorrow as well. I can guarantee that. One of the other big opportunities that I didn't realize how important the impact was going to be was when I became a director of sustainability for the first time at a company called Choi Kovas and Associates in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So they, at that time, were a single office, mid-sized firm, about 75 staff. And one day, early in to me figuring out my role, I was only there for a few months, one of the principals came by and she said, I've volunteered you for the Green Guide for Healthcare. And she's like, so you're going to be getting a call once a week and do whatever this person tells you to do. And I was like, but and I remember in my mind thinking, but I'm employed full time and you just volunteered me to do something for free, which is going to take a lot of my own time. And I remember sort of having a bit of a childish response to it internally, of course, because I thought, well, I mean, you do what you're told, right? It's 2010 and we don't want to go back to 2008, 2009 employment status. So I was like, fine, I'll start doing these calls. And I really didn't enjoy it at first, because I just thought, man, this is extra work and this is, very time consuming, and it's more than just an hour a week. But at some point I began to participate as opposed to fight and struggle with the fact that this was this thing that I had been told to do. And from that lesson, I learned that was where leadership happens. It doesn't necessarily happen just on the projects and just in the firm. Because I was a researcher with the Green Guide for Healthcare, that relationship extended for almost 2.5 years. And I built a database of clients across 65 international healthcare facilities, and really became, as a very young working professional, a trusted resource for sustainability and design, construction, and operations for hospitals. And that led to this huge research project that was presented at various different conferences and now has become part of evidence-based approaches that were catalyzed in 2013 within the launching of Lead for Healthcare. And it was that little bit of leadership beyond just the I show up to do my job and I go home kind of mentality, that I realized, like, oh, I really actually like doing research, and I actually like doing client engagement, and I like doing marketing, and I like doing peer-reviewed journal authorship, and I like speaking at conferences, and this is fun. And now, it's how you become a leader, and nobody trains you how to do that. It takes a little bit of luck, which I received when I was voluntold to do something that initially I didn't want to do. And then from that moment on, I was signing up for everything, because I realized that at some point I can do my job and do it very well. And I don't want to say with my hands tied behind my back, but with a lot less stress and fatigue about it than in the beginning when I was trying to kind of figure it all out. And so as things get easier, you fill the room in your career and your life with other things that give your soul food, so to speak. And that was a really valuable lesson that if we had talked about it, I might have been able to talk my way out of it, but because I fell into it, I learned to kind of love it.
We know that the tools will have to shape our process. And when it comes to residential architecture, Revit holds a lot of power if you know how to use it just right. Let's first talk about Revit itself. one of the best AEC tools because it uses building information modeling. That's where it's breaking down the project, all the architectural things, the 3D things into information, and it connects the information. Information doesn't leave the process. So it's like as if you're actually making a model and you're using that model to be directly generating. It sort of goes back to that idea of what we would do with architectural model and school. I've experienced this where that model is what we're drawing, what we're dissecting and understanding. With the information model, you still have that central model, and you're being able to draw drawings. You're being able to draw all sorts of information. You can use takeoffs, see exactly how many windows, how many doors, how much material is being used. And the parametric nature of it means it's all connected back. Whereas something like a CAD, which mimics the actual architectural process with hand drawing of having, okay, this is a section. Well, the section, if something changes, I have to go back and bring out my Mylar or bring out my Velium and redraw it. There's something that has changed. And so the difference with something like a BIM or CAD is that if I change anything in the model, all the drawings that are related to that are going to change. Even to the point of, if I need to work in phases where things need to change and I need to see the difference, that's actually also built into a BIM system as well. So that's going to be this crucial thing that BIM is setting itself apart, where it's not disconnected. It's parametrically connected. It's connected at all points. There's that 3D modeling aspect that Revit has, that Revit is a built-in 3D engine where it's knowing where every point is, it's knowing where every surface is, and there's that connection. So it's that model, and those are all connected with a set of data. If it's a type of wall, it's a type of roof, it's knowing what it is. And that's going to be something that is incredibly useful, because it's not just me making a dumb model, it's a model that has each element as its own agency. The multidisciplinary coordination is another great part of Revit, where Revit is made to automatically connect with engineers. It's made to connect even with contractors who all have their own part of the program that sort of focuses on their needs. I just have been working on some electrical plans with Revit, and it's also very easily built in. Like anything you bring in, you're actually bringing in something that could be directly from the manufacturer, whether it's lights, whether it's a paneling system, whether it's electrical, these are all actually could be directly connected. I've worked with furniture consultants as well, and the idea is we can get those straight from the consultant. We don't have to just create everything from scratch, though we love hand drawing as architects. Something about Revit being able to find the exact thing is a way we can greatly simulate, including going down to the point of if we're rendering it and we're showing it, we can of course render anything that we've done in Revit. Part of that, of course, does go into the skill of learning how to work with materials and learning how to set those. However, because of that BIM model, again, it's not just that you are setting the material for one object. You're setting a material not just for one layer, but you are setting the material for a family. So like a wall having a family means it's controlled all across the different parts of those families in the model. So I'm setting up a roof system and I'm saying all my shingle roofs need to be a particular type. I can be setting that up. And so that system of control and coordination is helping a real beautiful set to a lot of different stakeholders within the design process.
Now, what happens when design ambition meets digital frontier? Here's a glimpse into the world of computational design at Big and in parametric design with Oliver Thomas.
I think Zaha was like a generation before Big came around. I think Zaha is around, the firm is around 40 years old. Big right now is about 20 years old. So yeah, I think it was a kind of a later generation. And then, yeah, you did see like the newer kids on the block, like the Bigs and things like that, the baby Rems come out. And of course, everyone was inspired by these kind of new playful forms that were somewhat like parametrically driven as well.
So you navigated from the UK to New York. You had like a few major projects and firms that you work with. I guess, could you like talk about some of those experiences and sort of moments that sort of defined your thoughts in parametric design
As an architect, the one cool thing you can do is travel, because like it's, of course, your license is tied to a particular location, but generally architecture practices are quite global. Like here in Big, we have people from many different nationalities. Doesn't really matter what office you're in, you're going to get a mix of different people, right? And so when I did graduate, and I worked in London for a brief period, and then I managed to get a job in Hong Kong. At that time, China was booming, and the UK was like coming out of the second part of the Great Recession. And so there wasn't really much going on. So there was a lot of opportunity in Hong Kong, and a friend of mine got a job out there as well. And we were like, let's go. Let's just have a bit of fun and travel. And I went to work for IDAS in Hong Kong, which was a huge design firm. And so that's where I really started to use computational design to design, like as a designer. I spent a good few years there, and then after about 3 or 4 years or whatever it was, I then was really interested. I was always designing facades, like the actual design portion, and then I never really knew how to build them. And then that's where I came across Front, who are a facade consultancy firm, but they also do fabrication. Like they actually work with contractors, building, CNCing out panels and all this kind of stuff. So then I joined them, and that's really where I use computation to design, like to fabricate, build like facades that many different architects, like you'd work with all these different architects and all these different amazing products, which was really interesting to see how each firm works. And it was at that time I transitioned from Hong Kong to New York. I lived in New York for a little bit. Then my visa ran out. I came back to the UK for a bit. And then that's when I joined Big. I wanted to go back into architecture practice and, work within a practice that I was really aligned with my own design interests. And, with the skill set I had, I could help many people and many projects in the office. So, which is what I do now. And I joined them in New York. And 2 years ago, I moved here to the London office.
Could you talk about the life cycle? I suppose it's a project that gets built at Big, including sort of dealing and working with client demands as well. How does that parametric design and design technology, how does that incorporate and come through the process?
In terms of like how is computational design used throughout the life cycle of products, it's of course it goes with the stages, right? So like stage one is concept. That's at the beginning you've got like 100 ideas and you're testing them, and so we might be using computation or parametrics at that point to test a bunch of different ideas or generate a couple of the 10 options the team is developing. So then you're using it as very much like a design exploration study, right? And you're using it either to speed up your process, so you're not doing something repetitive, or you're using it because it's very difficult to model something manually without parametrics, right? We always want to avoid the designers doing manumetrics, which is when they manually try and model parametric stuff. So the concept stage can be like, big sweeping things. Could be like a building script or facade scripts, something as simple as just getting the areas from massings and things like that. Then as the product moves into, in the UK, it would be stage 3 and 4, or America, SD and DD. You are typically using Grasshopper to maybe refine a part of that design or add detail. So 2 examples would be, you kind of have the design from the concept stage of the facade, and then as you go into the next stages, you need to develop that script significantly to add in the details of the mullion, the sizes, glass, and all these other kind of things. Or it could be like the panelization. You kind of, in concept, it's not perfect, but it's enough for the renders and all that kind of stuff. In SD, you now need to use that script to refine it in a detailed way. So again, it's more maybe optimization. Of course, you've also got things like analysis and, all the kind of environmental tools that we have. And then as you get to later stages, often we don't get into fabrication, but it could be used, like parametric can be used to actually refine the design to a degree where it could be fabricated, or like very, very explicitly communicated to the contractor what the intent is and what the fabrication intent is. But, in a dream world, you could go on and actually go straight from design to fabrication. So depending on what stage you're in, we're utilizing different kind of design technology tools depending on what stage you're in, really. But it's always being used in some form.
You're listening to a special milestone episode of Architecture Beyond, our 30th. Today, we're celebrating by revisiting some of the most powerful and practical moments from past guests, sharing insights that continue to shape the way we practice, collaborate, and innovate in architecture. And a quick reminder, this episode is sponsored by Iamthestudio, your go-to platform for mastering top design tools and methods. Don't forget to use the code BEYOND30 at checkout to get 30% off any course. It's a perfect time to invest in your growth and sharpen your skills. Now back to the highlights. Simple tools, powerful outcomes. Our SketchUp episode was a fan favorite for practical workflows and visualization techniques.
Here's the SketchUp difference, right? Why it leads the field, right? It's a top design software suite for emerging design and construction professionals, but it's not going to be just the run-of-the-mill. In fact, SketchUp, starting over 2 decades ago and evolving, is really trying to address some emerging needs. That's a great thing about it. So as you get into it, if you've used it as a sort of just a basic tool, if you've used it for larger tools, you'll see that, hey, there's a different experience that's being provided today than maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And at the same time, it has like a lot of great features that it keeps on, okay? So SketchUp is a world-class model. Let's talk about some of those great features. It's a user-friendly interface, and it's kept that way, where you could just come and open the browser, and you could, from that simple set of a couple sets of tools, model something for an architectural project, a design project that really helps you move a project forward. We next look at things like 3D Warehouse and existing model libraries that help you fulfill a project with different entourage and elements to make it more realistic, more capture a vision, and also just give you some ideas. You can look at other people's projects. That's a wildly great way of experiencing design software. SketchUp also offers great accuracy and clear annotation. That's both with the SketchUp project that itself, just using the main SketchUp. You also are dealing with the layout, designing. The layout is pretty much an app by itself, but it integrates with the SketchUp project, and you can get clear annotation there. Though you can also do your annotation right out of SketchUp, the fact is having like something like a 2D modeler is also very, very useful. Next thing we're looking at is dynamic components and parametric elements. It's not just BIM specific programs that are doing a great service for the design industry. We're looking at things like that SketchUp has been continuously investing in and putting into its software for design professionals, so that we can create more consistent, quicker projects that are achieving a lot more. Of course, it is more of a mesh editor, but there are certain parts that you're going to be able to do just because it's giving you such an intuitive base. Also, that would be some of the later integration that we'll talk about shortly. The next thing is the layer and model organization tools that you're going to see right out of SketchUp to help you organize your geometry, different parts of projects. You have your layers. This, of course, also works with your internal file structure. It's just the idea is you could just use that interface and get around really fast, whether it's editing or whether it's creating a project. And so just having a good system is going to be putting you in the lead because of these capabilities. Next, SketchUp does a really great Google Earth and GIS integration. That means that you can put your project right on site, also get images and elements from Google Earth, you also have the ability to do a photo match. That's this ability to sort of keep your project really grounded. You see the background, adjust your 3D views to what's there. So like if you're trying to model existing or see how your project works in context, it's pretty simple. Next, there's easy rendering and visualization. That's both directly out of SketchUp, as they've used great competition building styles that will help you in using both 2D and 3D output from the project. Where you might consider it maybe not as much a rendering. However, the integration of different software like a V-Ray or an Enscape, those sorts also greatly integrate directly into this. And I will even talk about the fact that there are now new AI tools like Veras that also help you just take a model as it is, and just from the context, it will give you a great visualization. Finally, the extensive extension library is really valuable that you have with SketchUp. Again, there's a lot of other parts that are working sort of behind the scene, including integration with Revit, where SketchUp can open a whole Revit model. You can export and you can go back and forth with these programs. But however, these are some of the key elements that make SketchUp a world-class modeler. And
let's not forget that architecture lives through interiors. In this panel that Architecture Beyond hosted, Jared, Michelle Banks, and Lorraine Inslee brought modern elegance into focus.
I have the next question where I'm finding out if you could help name the quintessentials of a well-crafted space. And I'm avoiding going into the interiors architecture because ideas. Sometimes we like to both say the word space. How do you differentiate? Lorraine, if you start this one.
What are the attributes of a well-crafted space? I feel like that is why I found design and why I pursued it, was because, my childhood was wild. I think a lot of people can relate to that. And I feel like a lot of it was spent escaping the house or just going off to like a public library. There were a lot of civic buildings that I loved to spend time in those hours after school, or I just remember I have a lot of time spent kind of staring out the windows of different buildings, and those spaces had such an impact on me. And so, yeah, I wanted to give back in my own way. And I think that I've thought about this question throughout my career, because especially when I was deciding if I wanted to be interiors or architecture, because technically, someone had to decide that the window was there for someone to be able to look through it. Someone had to plan the lighting that's ambient and you're walking through the space. Someone now realized there's so many metrics that we can use to measure how we experience space, the level of sound, the amount of glare. And of course, when we look into all of the sustainability certifications, I'm really butchering my language here, but there's a lot of ways that those are now scored and can contribute to different points for WELL or for LEED. But I think what's a well-crafted space to me is a space that emphasizes natural lighting. The interior lighting that's not natural would be diffused. So we don't have it's really unnatural for human beings to experience overhead lighting directly at 8 hours of the day, because the sun is passing over us, we're experiencing shadows, things move. There's something called non-rhythmic biosensory simulation, which is a huge mouthful of words, but it's it's being able to see.
Bring out a dictionary.
I don't even know why I remember that,
That's a good word.
But it's describing water caustics when the light plays against water. And I think a well-crafted space allows you to experience those things while keeping you conditioned indoors. But the lighting that's artificial, is still mimicking that. I think level of noise has to do with programming, what are you using the space for? But those are the things I'm usually most sensitive to. And then, you get color and texture and all those other things, but I think people might be surprised that sometimes that stuff is secondary. At times, too, I think that I've walked into a space that has a lot of volume in its aesthetics, meaning it's really loud and bright, or there's something really, intentional going on aesthetically. And sometimes I wonder if that's a distraction from those really basic elements that help make us feel a way in a space.
For me personally, it would be a space has to evoke an emotion, right? So that is, you as the designer have control of those emotions that are going to be evoked in whatever spaces that you design. So as where the consumer or your client looks at it on those secondary layers, which is the furniture and the texture and the elements that you add on the back end, we as the designer are supposed to go in and how is this space going to function? So it has to function for my client. It has to create and evoke an emotion for their everyday living. How does this space make them feel? Right. And so to do that, you have to start with, okay, what in spaces that I enjoy makes me feel a certain way or evoke a certain emotion. So for me, that is natural light, starting out with really a blank canvas and layering lighting. So being able to demonstrate how I layered this lighting. What is this space going to look like at 10 p.m.? What is it going to look like at 10 a.m.? How does the colors and textures play a role in that? What is the lighting going to do, and how is that going to change these colors as the day progresses, that kind of thing. So whereas the everyday consumer looks at that on a very plain, oh, let's just make this space pretty. I go into this space and let's just make this space functional. Let me think of the bigger picture. Like if I take all the furniture out of this space, can someone still come in and say that this is a well-designed space? Because I thought of window placement. I thought of, putting dimmers on the lighting so I can create certain tones and throughout the day. So just thinking of it in that way, and people want to stuff all of their ideas into one space, and it's actually I love to use this quote all the time. Like people love, oh, I want to be like, I see a lot of new designers do this, or students, because I also teach at Belmont. But they try to put all of their ideas in one space. And I'm like, a really good, well executed design, you can take one of those ideas and play off that, and that be your whole concept. You don't have to put all of your ideas into one space. And it's actually harder to eliminate some of those things and edit down to a very good, successful design versus, I put all of my ideas. And so when I'm walking into this space, I'm like, oh, okay, what is this? And what is that? Like you're all over the place instead of having one strong, design concept that's going to evoke that emotion that you're really going for.
The future of architecture is more than about buildings. It's about building resilient practices. Here's Rachel Gresham, AIA, MBA, on designing a business that works for people. What do you think most firms can what are they getting wrong about business?
I think if I could throw a wrench in the spokes of anything, it would be how architects talk about their value. And this probably won't sound new to any of your listeners. I think that we have a hard time talking about what our value is. We have a hard time expressing what our value is to the public. We also don't have a huge ally in, television. When you go to networks that are talking about renovations and things, these our potential clients, especially for small firms, are watching these DIY and extreme renovation shows and thinking that this is reality. And so that doesn't really work for us. And of course, I'm sure a lot of folks would agree that maybe Instagram and Pinterest are not our greatest allies either. And I think that we have a hard time talking about value. I did a presentation in my marketing class, and we had to pick a topic of marketing to speak about, and we had to choose the topic at the very beginning of the semester. And I gave my presentation, I think 5 weeks later, and I saw that price was one of the topics that we could pick to speak about. And I was like, that's mine, because I want to talk to my colleagues or my fellow students about, what it's like to set a price for architecture services. And the very first part of my presentation, I went through what it takes to become an architect. So I talked about school, and I talked about exams, and I talked about experience, and I sort of made a comparison to practicing law and how, the longer you practice it, the better you get. And I asked them, this was via Zoom, it was during the pandemic, and I said, given these qualifications, how much do you think architects bill per hour? And in the chat, Brandon, you would have laughed as hard as I did. It was anything from $50 an hour to $500 an hour.
Okay.
And so I think that's a perfect little micro example of just like no one understands what our value is. And the way we talk about value. The example I like to give when talking about value is I make a comparison to how Coca-Cola might talk about their products. So if Coca-Cola is going to increase their prices for a soda 50 cents, maybe they're having supply chain issues or they can't source the right sugar, and it's just more expensive for them to produce this. They don't go to the consumers and say, gosh darn it, it's just harder to get sugar, and this is a real challenge for us. And the sugar that we used to have just isn't great, and it's taking longer to get here, and darn, we're just going to have to charge you 50 cents more. They don't do that, right? They go to the consumer and they spin it as a value choice. You're getting more value out of the sugar that we're sourcing. The aluminum that we're sourcing for our cans is more responsible. You're making a moral choice by paying 50 cents more for your Coke than you would another brand. And so how I compare that to architecture is perhaps we go to a client that has a really tough site and we say, well, gosh darn it, we're just going to have to get a geotech report this time, and we're going to have to get some add-ons, and that's going to be expensive, and we just don't know. It's really hard and uncertain for us. Instead of helping a client understand that they're getting more value by potentially paying you more in fee to say, you'll save money in the long run if we get these issues sorted out sooner. There's more value in what we can provide if we know more about the soils. There's more value in what we can provide if we know more about what's under the earth during a geotech report or a site analysis. So I wish that we would talk a little bit more about our value the way other businesses might talk about their value.
And finally, no design happens without code. In our recent episode, we broke down the International Building Code to demystify what every architecture knows. So why does mastering the IBC actually matter? Look, passing the ARE is table stakes. What sets you apart in the long term is confidence to pitch bold ideas backed by airtight code logic without burning fee hours and review cycles. Mastering the IBC gives you these key elements. Speed. It'll help you spot red flags early before they hit the budget. Credibility. You'll speak the same language as the fire marshals and plan examiners, so you can speak with confidence. And then freedom. You'll be able to use performance provisions to justify your innovation instead of defaulting to prescriptive boxes. Think of it as a rule book that turns risk into a runway. So grab your annotated code book, open a fresh page in that moleskin, let's turn constraints into catalysts. So ready? Let's break ground. And I will note that, of course, as this episode is recorded, you can always play it back and, of course, watch the video episode on our YouTube channel with Iamthestudio. Code and context. Let's roll back into the early 1900s where every major U.S. region had its own building code. On the East Coast, you had the BOCA. Out west, it turned into the Uniform Building Code. And the Southwest swore by the SBCCI. 3 separate playbooks, 3 different ways to size all types of things, right? From a fire-rated wall or a calculate for occupant load down to regional quirks. Brutal for national design teams and manufacturers. It was really fun those days, I bet. Fast forward to the late 90s when we hit the requirements of globalization, mega projects, and liability pressures that screamed for consistency. So in 1994, the 3 code bodies formed the International Code Council. Think Avengers Assemble, but for plan reviewers and design professionals, right? And by 2000, they dropped their greatest crossover issue, the International Building Code, or IBC. Like, newer designers don't know what they're missing out. One set of rules updated every 3 years or so, published in that satisfyingly chunky red book we all rug around. Red or blue, it differs based on the version, but still, you're going to know it if you're going to be a professional designer. Now let's talk about performance versus prescriptive and why it matters. Inside the currently blue covered book, you'll notice two voices speaking. The prescriptive voice is the micromanager, 2 exits, 44-inch clear widths, 2-hour rated shaft, don't ask why, just draw. Number 2 is performance voice, right? It's the coach. Provide a smoke layer 6 feet above the highest egress point for 20 minutes, right? It tells you what outcome is required and lets you decide how you want to achieve it. So here's the creative payoff, right? Prescriptive is where you're protected when time is tight, right? Follow the recipe, no accidents, no surprises. I mean, it's not about holding you to like a small box. It's just saying, hey, this is a quick solution. Performance unlocks innovation. Want a 5-story mass timber atrium? Model the smoke exhaust. Prove tenability, and the code says, sure, show me the math, right? The smartest architects dance between both voices, prescriptive for efficiency and performance for artistry. So don't look at it as something as an either or. How about a both and? So when you crack open the IBC, don't just memorize the tables. Listen for the music that works underneath. You know, it's a language of minimums, outcomes, and once you're fluent, you can remix it into a safer, smarter, and frankly cooler buildings. Right? Architecture Beyond was created to start better conversations about design, about impact, and about the real-world path we all walk in this profession. Whether it's mastering the IBC, rethinking sustainable design, or discovering what computational tools can do. Our guests have helped illuminate what it means to be an architect today, while I showcase a few episodes. There are dozens more moments, insights, and lessons to learn if you haven't explored our shows. So if you're new here, make sure to dive into the full episodes you heard today and more on our channel. And if you've been with us from the beginning, thank you for helping us build a platform for ideas that matter. This has been your host, Brandon Gibbs, architect and storyteller, and it's been a pleasure sharing with you. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this recap with a friend or colleague who could use a little inspiration. Until the next time, keep pushing the boundaries of architecture, and we'll see you in the next show.